and welcome back to another video. So, Mass Effect Andromeda has had a really shaky start in the media. Who would have guessed that Nvidia Shadowplay would have been the single greatest thing to happen to the Ministry of Silly Walks, and I think even more concerning for many, there have been worries about the facial animations, the writing, and then of course the voice acting. All of this has had some people quite concerned, myself included. My objective here is to cut through all the memes, all the bullshit, all that's floating around the place, and to give you a balanced opinion on Andromeda, especially in comparison to the previous entries in the series. We're going to be doing this topic by topic, including a kind of quick technical appraisal of the PC port, because I am indeed playing it on PC. I've played it for 8 hours via EA Access, and therefore I'm not under any sort of embargo. I've done all the content on the EA Access trial. I've been playing on a video editing PC with two 980s, 64 gigs of RAM, and a 6900K, so it is high-end, not Pascal though, and those of you with an i5 or an i7 at a higher clock speed will probably have better CPU performance for a gaming application than I will anyway. Alright, let's start off with the plot, one of the most important things in Mass Effect. I would have ideally spent the first act of the story being an explorer in a new galaxy, getting to know the place, but instead they went in a direction that is best described as being perhaps the new Star Trek movies versus, say, Star Trek TNG. You get your boots dirty pretty damn quick. While I would have preferred another direction, I am happy to see where this goes currently, and the setup is definitely interesting. I do think there's good room for plot development overall. Now, the speed at which they initially plow through the plot does mean that there are some times where you're not really invested enough in characters who, have some unfortunate circumstances to really care, and I do think that's a bit of a missed opportunity, as some of them feel like they really could have went more places if we actually had a little bit more time to spend with them. Now, of course, it's a Mass Effect game, so who is our protagonist? Well, we play as one of the Ryder twins, who are part of the Pathfinder team on the human Ark, with their father being the actual Pathfinder. You seem to be younger and less experienced in comparison to Shepard from the past trilogy. This is quite well reflected in the plot, actually, and it's well reflected with how people deal with you. So far, I've actually really taken to Ryder as a protagonist, and overall just seems like a really good protagonist for a game like this that still, it's got enough character to be sort of engaging as a lead, but also with enough room for you to sort of shape her personality. I went with Femme Ryder, much like with Shep. I heard reports of her voice acting being a good bit better. I've since then heard reports that the male voice actor is also pretty good, so I'll probably just do a playthrough with both of them at some stage. Let's talk about our expanded cast of characters. So far, none of them have really grabbed me a lot, though I've only spent a little bit of time with them. Vetra and Liam seem to be the most engaging so far. I wouldn't really worry about the negative reports on the characters right now. It's a long RPG. Most people have only had a few short scenes with each of their companions, and a lot of that is down to Origin Access and, of course, the early review embargo, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, dialogue. So the dialogue wheel is actually a bit different. You now have options that are based off emotion and tone, rather than a strict Paragon Renegade. I was actually really happy with this. I felt like I could better reflect how I would respond with that character. So overall, a very good impression with the dialogue system so far. Let's talk about gameplay. So just like with the jump from Mass Effect 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, Andromeda brings a really large improvement in the gameplay quality. Combat is fast-paced, and it's heavily based on positioning, with your various different abilities being sort of augmented with a new system with a jetpack and a dash. You can hop about the place, and it's really fun to use. Sadly, companion AI is still quite poor, and you have less control over their ability usage. I was playing the game on hardcore difficulty, and I found it to be a good challenge that made me think about my toolkit. Overall, the combat, in my view, is extremely promising so far, and I really loved even, say, what Mass Effect 3 did with combat. Now, exploration is another core part of the gameplay. Each planet seems like it's going to be sort of akin to a Dragon Age Inquisition zone. Now, within a planet, you travel from place to place in the Nomad, which is basically the Mako from ME1, but with better controls. It's fun enough, though there is worry about content bloat here. They also had this radiation system that kind of limited how far I could explore, which I really didn't like. It just felt rather arbitrary. Now, of course, this is a big RPG, so what's progression like? Well, I'm happy to say that this feels more like an RPG than Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. You gain points as you level up. They can be invested in a number of different abilities, split between tech, combat, and biotics. This includes active and passive abilities. You can only have 3 active abilities on your hotbar though, which means that, they can make each one of those abilities really quite powerful, but it does feel slightly limited as far as choice goes. Personally, I'd say 5 might have been a better balance to strike. You can also swap between classes now. Basically, there's a lot more freedom to mix and match than there was in the previous Mass Effect games, so you can really be a master of everything eventually, it would seem anyway. Now, part of the identity of your character being a certain class could kind of be lost here, but I do think this system has a lot of its own merits, and I really enjoy the freedom. What I can say is I'm very keen to continue progressing through the various different abilities and things like that. And it's definitely nice to see how a new installment to a franchise is actually not streamlining complexity away. It's actually adding some good stuff there. Now, you also have a crafting system for the various bits of armor and weapons that you can wear. Weapons and armor could have mods put into them, kind of like gems in WoW or something like that. I normally don't take to crafting systems, but really for me, it's about like resource gathering. I don't enjoy kind of doing MMO style hunting down ore nodes and stuff like that. So I'm kind of concerned that it might be a bit too overbearing with the game's overall progress, and that leads me on to the Inquisition problem. My largest fear is this game will feel too similar in structure to Dragon Age Inquisition. I know that game has many admirers, but for me it was too long and ponderous feeling to really get into. Many quests felt like they were from an MMO, and that just didn't work for me. I already get plenty of that from World of Warcraft, so I don't need it in my BioWare RPG. Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 were kind of big RPGs, but they weren't really that long. They had a lot of really interesting, high-quality content, with not a lot of filler, bar some of those side quests, to sort of distract you from that. Now, I really hope that they haven't kind of thought that bigger is better. My initial, impressions of the side quests are that they're actually quite weak, and that includes a little bit of some of the main quests that I've done. They sort of felt like MMO quests. There's a lot of, go here, interact with this, that sort of stuff. Now, the game structure did work quite well for, as an example, stumbling upon an abandoned settlement, solving the mystery of what happened there. That was quite fun, but it was contrasted by another one where it was just scan 5 panels and talk to an NPC, which wasn't really that interesting to me. Now, I want to talk about what I'm just calling EA's fuck-up. EA have shot themselves in the foot here with the trial and with their initial review embargo. It starts off well enough, but the first planet that you land on is basically Arizona. Not very interesting. It is a barren place, visually dull, in-game anyway. The first part of the main quest down there kind of feels like an MMO. Basically, the slice of content that they gave as an early preview and the early review embargo just isn't really that good. And, from playing the prologue quest, it's clear that there is top-notch quality stuff in there. And I think what's happened is that many of the opinions out on the internet are based on a particularly weak section of a game that I do think has a good amount of promise. This has, of course, impacted reviewers. They could only talk about the early, weak stage of the game because of the initial limited embargo. Basically, it seems like there's a decent likelihood that what we've played via Origin Access or the early review embargo kind of isn't really indicative of the whole product, but we will just need to know. And I guess that brings me on to some housekeeping for things. We once again find ourselves scanning loads of different star systems in this game. It's a really sort of visually fantastic thing. It's quite beautiful, but unfortunately, the usability just isn't there. Each time you go to a different planet, it plays an animation of your ship flying there as if you're looking through a camera attached to the underside, like the bottom of your ship. It's beautiful, but it ends up being quite slow and laborious when you have to scan many different worlds and asteroids and stuff. The game's UI also feels like a step backwards. There's far too many clicks. And it does this amazing thing. It seems to unload the game world whenever you enter the main menu, so you deal with this significant stuttering anytime you enter or exit the game's menu. If you accidentally hit escape, you just find, a big frame rate dip and just problems. You'll notice that many of the post-processing effects disappear for a few frames while the menu is transitioning on screen, and that just feels quite unpolished, especially because it comes with those really annoying frame rate dips. Okay, that's most of what I want to cover about the game, bar the big MacGuffin: animations, writing, and voice acting. And I'm going to go into detail here. While some of this might seem quite harsh, do bear in mind that I've had a lot of really good things to say about this game, and I'm very excited to play through the full thing once it actually comes out. Of course, it's Mass Effect, so it's always been known for its characters, and that means it's really understandable that these issues are important to people, and it's one of the core pillars of the game. I've got quite a bit of experience using Unity as a game engine, and I've worked with a few 3D animators before, so I'm going to attempt to explain what I think the issues here are. I want to point out that as much as Andromeda is getting flack from this, the human animations have always been pretty poor in the Mass Effect series. I think that this game is creeping people out so much because of the uncanny valley. So bar hair, we have really detailed character models. The shadows used for skin are quite convincing as well. Essentially, we've got more realistic digital actors who move in a really unrealistic and kind of creepy way. Basically, it jumps headfirst into the uncanny valley, and that's the core issue. I think that many of these problems could be fixed via patching. Not sure if they'll do that, but yeah, patches would help. I found that during regular gameplay, the animations are great. Running around, jumping, they all look and feel really good. Though, yeah, sometimes they bug out, but I can live with that. The main problem, indeed, is the facial animations. There just is no escaping it. They're not good, at least for the human characters. Aliens are, well, aliens. We don't know what their faces look like, so they kind of get away with it. But we've spent our entire lives looking at human faces, so any issues really do stand out, and there's a few core ones. So, number one, the eyes. They often are not looking in the right place, and they regularly dart about the place in an unnatural manner. Also, blinking is just completely off. Now, from a technical perspective, the materials used for the eye shaders are simply incorrect. They do not respond to lighting around them realistically, which makes them feel out of place, and it leads to that effect of you looking into these characters with just dead eyes. The other core problem is the transition between different emotions. The game really struggles here. Now, I'm assuming that this stuff mostly isn't hand-done, as that would be a lot of work, and instead they're doing some form of interpolation. They clearly need to refine that system because the interpolation between the various different blend shapes used to create the emotions in the characters, it just looks really wonky. There's times where it just seems like the characters' animation rigs clearly don't let them display a full range of emotion, and this, I believe, is the cause of the Botox effect that many human characters have. Essentially, they need a more detailed rig with more blend shapes, more handles, and things like that, if they're going to be able to create a truly compelling digital performance. This is compounded by one final problem. The scenes are usually very unpolished in comparison to previous BioWare games, and I'm talking about the proper sort of dialogue scenes. Basically, they're poorly directed and poorly shot, with clunky transitions between cuts that I wouldn't go with myself, and dialogue lines that are implemented poorly, such that there are unnatural pauses in the dialogue. Now, I've been working on dialogue for the World of Warcraft add-on that me and my team have been producing, and believe me, having an extra 0.2 or 0.3 second delay between a line of speech, that is often the difference between a performance that feels natural and a performance that feels robotic. They also don't really mask their problems via the camera. Many scenes are shot in a very simple, shot, reverse shot sort of format, which really manages to emphasize the weaknesses. Now, I've heard reports from some Dragon Age Inquisition players that often they manage to get away with their weak animation system because they would use the camera and the environment to craft a really well-cut, well-directed scene that sort of played to the game's strengths. Now, the voice acting. It ranges from good to okay to wooden to hilaribad, as has always been the case with BioWare. Now, the core cast is quite good, no big problems there. The main problems really are just the side characters, so I don't think it's going to be a humongous worry moving forward. Now, let's quickly just mention PC performance. It was initially terrible to me, but I swapped over the profile for SLI from the Mass Effect 1 to Battlefield 1, which fully then utilized both cards. When on planets, I got between 60 and 70 frames at 3440 by 1440 on high settings. Using 1980, I was struggling to get more than 40 frames per second at that resolution, but dropping it down to 1440p or 1080p brought things back up to 60. There does seem to be a strange interaction as well between depth of field around the side of models. Not sure if it's like an anti-aliasing problem or a motion blur one, but it can be quite distracting, having somebody's face just melt into oblivion as you talk to them. Overall, though, I think if you're on a modern Pascal or I've forgotten the generation, like the 900 series, if you're on one of those cards, you should be grand. Now, overall, I'd say that those facial problems aside, the game is beautiful. Its landscapes are beautiful for the most part, and the recommended specs and performance stuff seems to have been quite conservative, so yeah, you should be okay. So really, what is my take from all of this? Right, it seems like an incredibly ambitious game. The scope seems to be massive. And I've even heard of reviewers who don't know if they're actually going to be able to make the embargo date, even though they've played the game for upwards of like 8 hours a day. Now, I am deeply worried that they will repeat some of the issues that I felt Dragon Age Inquisition had, and that pursuit of quantity has negatively impacted the quality of the game. There are certainly suggestions that that might be the case based on the first 8 hours that I've played. Now, I do see lots of glimmers of hope. The setup is cool, I like most of the main characters, and the companions do seem like they've got promise. Certainly, you know, look at Ashley and Caden in Mass Effect 1. Boring. Look at the first 5 hours of Mass Effect 1. It had its problems. What does kind of confuse me, I guess, is the lack of polish in the opening hours of the game. It's 2017, you know, you would have expected them to have came on quite a bit more, and how that's, you know, it's unfortunate how that is interacted with the review embargo. It does seem like this game really could have done with some more months in the oven so the developers could better tune the facial animations, put more time into the cinematography, and perhaps squashed a few bugs. Overall, they are my thoughts on Mass Effect Andromeda after 8 hours. I'm going to buy the game, and I will probably let you know what my full thoughts are. What I would say is it's probably not a great idea to pre-order the game. I would say that in almost every case anyway. Overall, I think it's worth waiting for the reviews and seeing what they're like and then making a purchase decision. But I hope you found this video at least you know, interesting or instructive or something like that. I'm trying to give a more balanced and less ranty kind of overview of the game. But really, that's it for me, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.